Hey everyone, this is Matt Hendricks with the Sharpening Guy, and this is a Shun that just came in, and you can see it has a couple small chips in the edge right there. Maybe you can see them better against a lighter background. So they're not huge chips, but they're there. But these are the sort of chips that are small enough that you could remove them at home if you know how to sharpen with water stones without too much effort. Obviously, if you had a rougher stone, it would be even easier, but I'm going to show you how you can do it even with just 1,000 grit stone. So just for the demonstration here, I am going to use a King 1000 grit stone. It's not the fastest cutting stone out there or the roughest or whatever, but you'll see how even with this King 1000 grit stone, I'll be able to get the chips out pretty easily. Now, I have other videos showing you how to just fully sharpen your knife with water stones, and so you can watch them if you just want to know the basic sharpening process. But in terms of removing these chips, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the roughest stone we have. Now, like I said, I'm starting with 1000 grit, even though I have others just to show you, but if you have a rougher stone, use it. And I'm going to start at the sharpening angle. I'll go back out and thin this back out later after I get the chips out, then I'll bring the thinness back to where I want it. But just to get the chips out, I'm going to start at the sharpening angle, and then basically, using the same motion we use for sharpening, I'm just going to start grinding away at these chips. And I'm going to use a lot of pressure downward on the stone while I do this. Remember to really push with this hand down into the stone, and then your other hand holding the knife here maintains the angle. And also, when you're doing this, make sure that you're sharpening the whole length of the blade, because while the chips are just right here and you want to get those out, you don't want to create a hollow in the blade here and then have these sections be lower, because you still, when you rock it against the cutting board, you want it to have a nice curve. So you want to, even though the chips are right here, you want to remove metal evenly along the entire edge. Obviously, the more of your stone surface you can use, the flatter your stone will stay, so use as much of your stone as you can. And I am pushing down on the stone, like I mentioned, with at least several pounds of pressure. But most of the back and forth motion is actually coming from my shoulders. And also, make sure with any knife, but especially a laminated knife like this where there's a hard steel core between softer layers on the outside, make sure that you grind equally on each side of the knife. Now, if you had an asymmetric Japanese knife, then you might need to grind more on one side than the other, but for most knives, you'll grind about equally on both sides. And you don't have to count your strokes or anything, but just look at it and make sure you're removing an even amount of steel from each side. And already those chips are quite a bit smaller. Now normally, when somebody sends a knife like this in, I just go ahead and do this on one of my knife maker's grinders and get the chips out really quickly. But again, the purpose of this video is to show you how when you're at home and you don't have all the fancy equipment I have, where even if you just have a basic 2 water stone set of say 1,000 and 6,000 grit stone or something like that, how you can still get these chips out and it doesn't have to take you forever. Now, one nice thing about these stones, which some water stones are like this and some water stones aren't, but particularly these king stones do not load up, and so they keep cutting efficiently. Some other water stones, if they started to load up more, you might just have to take your flattening plate, flatten it out a little bit just to get some of that embedded steel out, and then you would keep going. Don't know if you can see, but those chips are already a lot smaller. They're probably 2/3 of the way out or so. And remember to work the whole blade evenly, because you want to maintain the rock of the knife so that it rocks nicely like that. Make sure you keep your stone clean. You can see here too, like I mentioned earlier, how I really am using the entire surface of my stone. And that just helps it stay nice and flat. Now, if you didn't want to do this all at once, you could do a couple minutes here and there, and then over time get the chips out, but we're almost done. So even if you do want to do it all at once, it doesn't have to take that long. Now, you can also go slower, and that's fine. Obviously, you know, I've sharpened knives professionally for over 10 years, and so I'm pretty competent to go quickly. Almost done. And again, I'm doing this at the angle you would normally sharpen the edge at, like I talk about in my other how to sharpen videos. And so when I'm done, you know, I'll have moved the edge up into a little bit thicker steel on the knife blade as we got past the chips. So after you get the nicks out, then you're going to want to go back, like I explained in my other videos, and lay the knife a lot flatter and actually thin it out behind the edge, so it's still nice and aerodynamic. Get a nice fluid motion from your shoulder and a lot of pressure down towards the stone on the blade. with this hand that's pushing on the blade. This hand, you just keep the angle constant. One of them is pretty much out, except for just a speck, and the other one is almost out because there were a couple of them in there. Again, I'm sharpening the full length of the blade this whole time and removing steel all along the edge at the same rate, even though the chips were only right in this section. Because when you go to use this against a cutting board, you still want it to have this nice curve here so that it rocks nicely. The one chip is completely gone and just a faint hit of the deeper one. I think that the chips are pretty much out. There might just be a hint of the back one in there, so just making sure here. Alright, so those chips are completely out now. And after all that grinding on either your rough or your medium stone, it'd be easier on a rougher stone and even faster than this. I don't have a timer here, so I don't know how long it takes. You can look on the time thing on your video screen and see. I'm guessing maybe 10 minutes or something, but I don't really know. But anyway, but even with a medium stone like this, and a slower cutting medium stone at that, it didn't take that long. And if you had used something like the Geshin 400 or something like that, this would have been out even way faster than this. But anyway, so like I said, the chips are out. After all that, I definitely have a burr. I've definitely re-apexed the edge after all that grinding, so I don't have to worry about checking for that. Now, like I said, to do a good job of sharpening this, the next step is to go lay this knife almost flat and really thin out to make that edge bevel a lot smaller again and really make it more aerodynamic again as it goes through food. And then, since this is a Damascus knife, after I thin it out, I'm also going to re-etch it with acid so that the Damascus pattern is really pretty again. But anyway, for purposes of this video, this is how you get those chips out. So I'll just finish up and just sharpen the edge real quick. And then after the video's over, I will do the thinning with my knife maker's grinder, and then I'll do the etching, and then just sharpen the edge up a final time. But just to show you that we did get to an edge and the chips are out and it's sharp, we'll just finish up here, a few edge trailing strokes. The reason you do edge trailing strokes when you're finishing up is because edge trailing strokes produce a thinner apex to the edge than edge leading strokes do for the same grit. Now it's true that edge trailing strokes also produce a larger burr or wire edge, but if you know how to deburr your knife properly, then that's not a problem. So anyway, we got the edge nice and aligned and thin there. This was the King 1000 grit stone, like I said. I think that's about, I don't know, probably a $30 stone or something if you buy one new. And we'll just finish it up with this is the King Ice Bear 6000, which again I think is somewhere in the $20, $30 range. So these aren't expensive stones. You're welcome to use better stones if you like, but these will work fine. So again, we'll finish up with edge trailing strokes here. On the finishing stones, I pretty much only use edge trailing strokes because you don't need to really grind anything or reestablish an edge. You've already done that on the rougher stones. You just need to polish it up and then deburr. And again, feel free to go slower if you want to. All right. Draw it through a soft piece of wood a couple times, just to fold the burr over so we can cut it off with a couple more edge trailing strokes. And like I said, the soft piece of wood there just kind of folds the burr over, and then when you go back, your stone can cut it off. All right, so just dry that off. Make sure we got the edge all dried off. And if I hold this up against one of these light colored stones again, hopefully you can see how there are no chips anywhere in the edge anymore. They were right kind of in this section somewhere in there. So you can see it's a nice clean edge. Now again, like I said before, you should thin this out then before you resharpen the edge to make sure it cuts really well. But even just after resharpening the edge like that and getting the chips out quick with a couple water stones, it's back to, you can see it shaves hair really well. And if I were to grab a piece of paper here so you can see, because if there were any chips in the edge it would catch on the paper. So you can see there are no chips in the edge. And it cuts through that just fine. Like I said, it's a nice clean edge. So anyway, even if you're at home, you don't have all the fancy equipment I have, or even if you don't have a rough stone but you have a medium stone, you can go ahead, get those chips out yourself, and then, like I said, go back to one of my other videos that shows the regular sharpening process and explains it all in detail, and you can get your knife back in working order. Thanks for watching. I'm Matt Hendricks with The Sharpening Guy, and you can find me at thesharpeningguy.com.